The courtroom was already full long before Ethan Cole stepped inside. Every seat was taken, reporters lined the back row, family members whispered in clusters, and flashing cameras waited like predators for the first sign of weakness. It was supposed to be a routine inheritance dispute, a legal battle over Richard Cole's sprawling business empire. But for Ethan, it felt more like a public execution waiting for its final act. He adjusted his coat as he walked in, keeping his expression controlled. Calm, neutral, the kind of calm that takes years of training to master. No one in that room knew what he had been through, and that was exactly how it had to stay. At the center table sat Richard Cole, his father. Dressed in an expensive charcoal suit, Richard looked like a man who owned the room before the judge even arrived. His posture was relaxed, almost amused, as if the entire trial was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Beside him sat his legal team, polished and confident, and next to them, Ethan's younger brother, Daniel, avoided eye contact. The judge entered. The room rose. The trial began. For the first few minutes, everything followed procedure: opening statements, documents, legal formalities. But Ethan noticed something unusual. Richard kept smiling, not the smile of a man defending himself, but the smile of someone who already knew the outcome. Then Richard's attorney stood. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "the defendant, Ethan Cole, has made repeated claims of military service connected to classified Pentagon operations. We intend to prove these claims are entirely fabricated." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Ethan didn't react. He had expected this. But what came next was sharper than expected. The attorney slid a folder forward. "Our investigation shows no verifiable record of Mr. Cole's alleged service, no deployments, no official clearance history, nothing that confirms his story." A few people in the gallery exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "So he lied." Richard leaned back slightly, satisfied. Then he spoke for the first time that day. "I told you all," Richard said loudly, turning toward the judge. "My son has always been imaginative, but this is different. This is fraud." Ethan's jaw tightened. "My son," Richard continued, emphasizing the words like they tasted bitter, "walked away from this family years ago and built a fantasy life to justify his absence. Now he returns to claim inheritance under false identity and false heroism." The word fraud echoed through the room. Cameras clicked faster. Ethan could feel the narrative shifting in real time. The room wasn't asking whether he was innocent anymore. They were already deciding he wasn't. Daniel finally looked at him just for a second and quickly looked away again. That hurt more than anything Richard could say. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Cole, Sr., please restrain from commentary and allow evidence to." But Richard interrupted. "I will not let an impostor take control of my company," he said firmly. "Not after everything I built." Ethan finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You didn't build it alone," Richard laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Is that your defense, sentiment?" The courtroom murmured again. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, not anger, not fear, something colder, something trained into him over years of operations where emotion got people killed. He said nothing more, because he couldn't. The truth he carried wasn't allowed to be spoken here. Years ago, Ethan Cole had disappeared from public records the moment he entered a classified defense intelligence program tied directly to the Pentagon. His identity had been partially sealed, his missions erased from civilian databases, not because he was important to himself, but because what he worked on was. He had lived under different names in different countries, doing work that never made headlines and never would, work that protected people who would never know his face, and while he was gone, Richard Cole had rewritten the story. To the world, Ethan wasn't serving his country. He was abandoning his family, a disappointment, a liar, a man who ran away from responsibility. That narrative had been enough to turn relatives against him, enough to erase him from family conversations, enough for Daniel to grow up believing his older brother simply didn't care. Richard's lawyer cleared his throat again. We request the court dismiss Mr. Ethan Cole's claims regarding financial entitlement due to lack of credibility. The judge leaned forward, reviewing documents again. Slowly, his expression began to shift, not convinced, but uncertain. Dangerous ground. Ethan noticed it immediately. This was the moment everything could collapse. Outside the courthouse windows, a distant engine roared. At first, no one noticed. Then a black government vehicle pulled up. Two men in dark suits stepped out carrying a sealed envelope marked with federal insignia. Inside the courtroom, Ethan didn't move, but somewhere deep in his mind he knew the silence that followed would change everything. And Richard Cole's confidence, so carefully built over years of control, would not survive what was about to enter that room. The courtroom door opened without ceremony. No announcement, no warning. Just a quiet, controlled movement that didn't match the tension inside the room. Two federal agents in dark suits stepped in, their presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Pens froze above paper. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. One of the agents walked directly toward the bench. The judge frowned. This is an active proceeding. Identify yourselves. The agent didn't rush. He placed a sealed envelope on the judge's desk with careful precision. The paper bore unmistakable markings, official federal seals, classification stamps, and a warning strip that made several people in the courtroom instinctively lean forward. Your Honor, the agent said calmly, this document is to be opened immediately and reviewed in private context of this case. A murmur spread through the gallery. Richard Cole straightened in his seat for the first time that day. His confident expression flickered, but only slightly. Then he leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something, almost amused. More theatrics, he muttered. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't even look at him. The judge hesitated, then broke the seal. The sound of the envelope tearing was louder than it should have been. For a moment, the only movement in the room was the judge's eyes scanning the page. Then everything changed. His expression tightened, then softened, then sharpened again, as if he was trying to process multiple truths at once. He flipped to the next page, and the next. The silence grew heavier. Richard noticed. Your Honor, Richard said smoothly, if this is about Mr. Cole's alleged service, I assure you, quiet. The judge said sharply. The single word cut through the room like a blade. Richard stopped. That had never happened before. The judge looked up slowly. This court has received confirmation from the Department of Defense regarding Ethan Cole's identity and service record. A ripple of confusion moved through the gallery. Richard blinked once. I'm sorry. The judge continued reading. Mr. Cole's service is partially classified under federal intelligence protection protocols. Certain records are not available for civilian review due to national security restrictions. The courtroom went still. Daniel's head lifted slightly for the first time. Richard laughed under his breath. That's convenient. The judge didn't react. He turned another page. There is also a directive attached, the judge said. It states that public misrepresentation of Mr. Cole's identity or attempts to discredit his protected service may constitute interference with active national security operations. The word operations landed heavily in the room. The agent who delivered the letter stood motionless near the wall. Richard's smile faded. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. Your Honor, are you suggesting my son is, what, a secret agent now? The judge looked at him directly. I am stating that federal authorities have confirmed Mr. Ethan Cole's service cannot be discussed in full detail in this courtroom. A stunned silence followed. Reporters lowered their cameras slightly, unsure whether they were witnessing something real or something impossible. Ethan finally spoke, but only a few words. I never lied, he said quietly. Richard turned sharply toward him. Don't you dare stand there and pretend. Mr. Colasar. The judge interrupted again. You will maintain order. The authority in the judge's voice had changed. It wasn't procedural anymore. It was controlled caution. Richard leaned back slowly, his confidence cracking at the edges. So what exactly are you saying? That my son disappears for years, gives us no explanation, and now I'm supposed to believe he was working for the Pentagon in secret. The judge glanced at the document again. That is what the federal confirmation states. A chair creaked somewhere in the back row. Daniel whispered, barely audible, Ethan. It was the first time he had said his name all day. Ethan didn't look at him yet. He couldn't afford to, because the truth was still incomplete. The letter wasn't just confirmation. It was protection, but also limitation. It only revealed what was necessary to stop legal escalation. Not everything he had done, not everything he had sacrificed. Richard's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, classified or not, there is still the matter of financial fraud claims and inheritance disputes. Those matters will proceed, the judge said firmly. However, the credibility argument against Mr. Cole is no longer valid. The phrase landed like a hammer. No longer valid. Richard's face tightened. For years he had controlled the narrative, controlled the family story, controlled how Ethan was remembered. Now a single sealed letter had undone all of it. Outside the courtroom, the sound of the engine faded. The federal vehicle remained, but its message had already been delivered. Inside, the judge closed the file gently. This court will proceed with caution given the sensitivity of the material presented, he said. Then he looked directly at Ethan. For the first time, it wasn't suspicion in his eyes, it was respect and fear. Richard noticed that too, and something inside him shifted, something that had never shifted before. Because for the first time in his life, Richard Cole realized he might not be the most powerful man in the room anymore. The silence after the Pentagon letter didn't fade, it settled. Even after the federal agents left the courtroom, their presence lingered like an invisible weight pressing down on everyone inside. No one spoke freely anymore. Every whisper felt dangerous. Every glance felt like it carried consequences. Richard Cole, however, refused to accept that reality. He sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched, eyes locked on Ethan, as if staring hard enough could undo what had just been revealed. The confidence he once wore so effortlessly was now fractured, but pride kept it from fully breaking. This changes nothing, Richard finally said. His voice was lower now, less theatrical, more controlled. Even if he worked some classified job, that doesn't erase what he did to this family. Ethan slowly turned toward him. For the first time, there was something different in his expression. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. You're still saying I abandoned you, Ethan said quietly. Richard leaned forward. You disappeared. I was deployed, Ethan replied. That's what you claim. The judge raised a hand. We are not reopening classified testimony. Proceed with relevant financial matters. That was the opening Ethan's legal team needed. His attorney stood immediately, placing a second folder on the table, thicker than the first. He slid it forward slowly, deliberately, letting the courtroom feel its weight. Your Honor, The attorney said, "We would like to introduce financial records obtained through legal audit requests and forensic accounting." Richard's eyes narrowed. "That is unrelated," he snapped. "This is an inheritance dispute, not Mr. Colasar," the judge warned. The attorney continued. "These records show a consistent transfer of company funds from coal industries accounts to offshore holdings over the past 8 years. A ripple spread through the room. Richard froze. Ethan didn't react. He already knew what was coming. The attorney tapped the document. "These transfers coincide with the period Mr. Ethan Cole was allegedly absent from the family. During that time, the company reported significant losses that were publicly blamed on mismanagement attributed to Mr. Ethan Cole's disappearance." Daniel shifted in his seat. His face tightened slightly, confusion mixing with discomfort. Richard spoke quickly. "That's ridiculous. My son has no authority over company finances." The attorney nodded. "That is correct, which is why it is significant that internal signatures linked to Mr. Richard Cole authorized these transfers." The words landed like a strike. For the first time, Richard didn't respond immediately. Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but heavier now. "You used my name as the reason the company was failing." Richard's eyes snapped to him. "Don't twist this." But something was already shifting in the room. The narrative was no longer stable. The attorney opened another file. "There is also evidence of altered trust documentation following the death of Mr. Ethan Cole's mother." That sentence changed the air completely. Even the judge leaned forward. Richard's expression tightened sharply. "That has nothing to do with this case." Ethan's hands, resting on the table, stiffened slightly. The attorney continued anyway. "According to these records, Mr. Ethan Cole was removed as primary beneficiary of the family trust shortly after his mother's passing. The modification was executed without standard dual signature validation, a pause, then softer, which suggests intentional manipulation." Daniel's head turned toward Richard slowly. For the first time, uncertainty turned into something deeper, doubt. Richard noticed it enough. He said sharply, "This is a smear campaign." But the room no longer responded to him the same way, because now there was something else entering the space, something heavier than legal evidence. Truth. Ethan's attorney placed one final item on the table, a sealed envelope. This was recovered from a private storage unit belonging to the late Mrs. Cole, he said. Richard's face flickered for the first time. Ethan stared at it. He already knew what it was before it was opened. The attorney carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Ethan," he read aloud. The courtroom went completely still. Even Richard didn't interrupt. The attorney continued, "If you are reading this, then I am no longer there to protect you from the way your father sees the world. He will rewrite stories. He will reshape truth until it serves him. But you must remember, you were never the problem in this family." A quiet shift passed through Ethan's expression. Something he had buried for years. The attorney kept reading. "He will say you left us, but I know the truth. You were taken by duty long before you ever left home, and I am proud of you, even if he never will be." Daniel swallowed hard. His hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Richard, however, broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, controlled voice. "This is irrelevant," he said again, but weaker this time. "A personal letter does not enough." The judge interrupted, sharper than before. The courtroom fell silent again. Richard looked around, as if searching for allies, but found none. For the first time, he was alone in his own narrative. Ethan finally picked up the letter himself. He read it silently, and something inside him softened not into weakness, but release. Years of being called a liar, a traitor, a ghost who abandoned his family, all of it was beginning to unravel. Daniel's voice finally broke the silence. "I knew," he said quietly, Everyone turned. I knew you weren't lying. Daniel continued, eyes fixed on Ethan now. But I didn't say anything. Richard's head turned sharply toward him, but Daniel didn't stop. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of losing everything if I stood against him. The truth didn't just expose Richard. It exposed everyone who stayed silent. Ethan looked at his brother for a long moment. No anger, only distance slowly closing. And for the first time in years, the courtroom didn't feel like a place of accusation anymore. It felt like the beginning of something breaking open. The final day of the trial arrived with an uneasy silence over the courthouse. There were no celebrations outside, no confident smiles from Richard Cole's legal team. Even the reporters spoke in lower tones, as if the building itself demanded respect after everything it had already revealed. Inside, the atmosphere was heavier than ever. Ethan sat calmly at the defense table, hands folded, expression steady. But something in him had changed, not in strength, but in direction. He was no longer trying to be understood. He was waiting for truth to finish speaking for itself. Richard Cole, however, looked exhausted in a way money couldn't fix. His suit was still perfect, his posture still controlled, but his eyes betrayed him now. They flickered too often. His confidence didn't sit naturally anymore. It clung to him like a fading habit. Daniel sat beside him, but at a distance. Not physically, emotionally, the judge entered. Court is now in session, he announced. No one stood with the same energy anymore. It was routine now, not ceremony. Then the judge turned a page in his file, and everything shifted again. Before we proceed with final arguments, the judge said, "This court has received additional federal testimony relevant to Mr. Ethan Cole's service and conduct." Richard's head snapped up. "This is absurd," he said immediately. "We already heard enough classified nonsense." The judge raised his hand. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." The tone was final. From the side entrance, 2 federal officials entered again. This time, they were not just delivering documents, they were here to testify. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Ethan Cole's service history has been reviewed under interagency clearance authorization," he said. "There is no evidence of misconduct, fraud, or misrepresentation." A pause. Then the second official added, "However, there is documented evidence that Mr. Richard Cole attempted multiple unauthorized channels to obtain classified information regarding his son's assignments." The courtroom shifted instantly. Richard went still. That was the first real crack. "That is false," he said quickly. "I never," the official continued without reacting. "Requests were submitted through political intermediaries and private security consultants. All were denied due to national security restrictions." The judge looked at Richard directly. For the first time, it wasn't procedural. It was judgment forming. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was quiet but carried cleanly through the room. "You didn't just try to erase me," he said. "You tried to expose what you weren't allowed to understand." Richard turned sharply. "I was protecting my company. From your own son?" Ethan asked. That question didn't need volume. It needed silence, and the room gave it to him. The judge closed the file in front of him. "This court finds no basis for the claim that Mr. Ethan Cole committed fraud or identity deception," he said firmly. "Those accusations are dismissed in full." A wave of disbelief moved through the room, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "evidence presented indicates financial misconduct within Cole Industries under the direction of Mr. Richard Cole." Richard stood abruptly. "This is a setup. Sit down," the judge repeated, louder this time. Richard hesitated but sat, slowly. For the first time he obeyed. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. That wasn't the kind of victory he wanted anymore. The judge continued reading final rulings, asset freezes, audit orders, federal review recommendations. Richard's empire, once untouchable, was now under formal investigation, but the most important moment wasn't legal. It was human. Daniel stood, not dramatically, just stood. "I need to say something," he said quietly. Richard looked at him sharply. But Daniel didn't sit back down. "I stayed silent," he said. For years, his voice cracked slightly, but he continued, "I let you destroy him in front of everyone because I thought it would protect me." Richard's face tightened. "But I was wrong," Daniel said. "It didn't protect anything. It just made us all smaller." He turned toward Ethan. "I'm sorry," he said. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Then, after a long moment, he nodded once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement, enough for now. The judge delivered the final ruling. Ethan Cole's claims to inheritance were partially validated. He would receive his lawful share, but more importantly, his identity and service record were officially recognized under federal protection. Richard Cole's control over the narrative was gone, completely. When the session ended, the sound of the gavel didn't feel like closure. It felt like ending a chapter that had been waiting too long to break. Outside the courthouse, sunlight hit the steps differently. Ethan walked out first. No cameras surrounded him immediately this time. No accusations, just space. Behind him, Richard exited slowly. For the first time in his life, he wasn't followed. He stopped halfway down the steps and looked around, almost confused, like a man expecting an empire to still be there when he turned his head. But it wasn't. It had already left him. Ethan didn't look back. He simply paused once, then continued forward. Because revenge, in its quietest form, wasn't destruction. It was truth finally standing where lies used to live.